University of Sankore at Timbuktu, the last of the great African universities. At the end of their teaching days, and I'm now a professor emeritus, meaning that I'm retired, but I still teach. At the end of their teaching days, they would wander through the great country, Sangay, as honored scholars, and they would give of their wisdom free of charge to the populace, and they were so well thought of, these master teachers, that people would take their goods and their service from one place to the other, and one would consider it an honor for the teacher to stay in their homes, and many times the chair that he sat in is retired, and no one is ever permitted to sit in the chair again unless he's going to get married or he needs some extra wisdom. And these great scholars would wander up and down throughout the country until someone would say, "Oh, Master Teacher, lend me of your wisdom, or will you solve this problem for me?" In reading about this, especially in a book called Timbuktu, the Mysterious, I was trying to decide, what am I going to do when I retire? So, coming here to Reverend Daltrey's church, because I knew him 25 years ago, and because I related to him through the years in his different fights and different struggles, and had a great deal of respect for the energy he still got. Most of mine I've used up. Coming back here to this church and my relationship to him and his effort, I seem to have fulfilled to have more time to teach among the populace and to teach the subjects that you otherwise would not have the time to teach. Now tonight I am taking a subject that might be strange to you, because most of your life you have been trained in an atmosphere that would tend to make you believe that there was nothing of substance before Christ. You look at the world before the European concept of Christianity as a barren world without substance and without spirituality. That is unfair, because that world had more spirituality before the formation, the Western formation of religion, than it has right now. Now, I must distinguish between what I'm talking about so you can understand. I am talking about the European formation of Christianity as against the presence of the spiritual elements in the world that went into the making of the religion, such elements being already in existence 3,000 years before Christ. John Jackson, one of our leading writers, has written a new book called Christianity Before Christ. A lot of people will not read the book solely because they think it offends them. It is an excellent book, because he is not saying there was no religion before Christ. He is saying that the same elements, the same teachings that went and ultimately into the formal making of the religion you call Christianity already existed and that what you are dealing with is the formalization of the religion as against the existence of the elements that went into the making of the religion. All we are dealing with are the steps of the development. Now, I have to first deal with the history of the world, because you live in a Eurocentric intellectual universe, and the European has brainwashed your mind through the media and through the textbooks and through the magazines into thinking that there was no world of consequence before he arrived, and the Arab has brainwashed you into thinking that there was no world of consequence before he arrived. Now, I want to point to the world that you created before either one of them arrived, that was better than any world that existed after they arrived with their disruptive elements. And I want to show you how to separate Islam from Arabism and how to separate Christianity from Christendom. Christianity is a religion, Christendom is a European political instrument. Then I want to get one thing across to you which is difficult. That there's a certain kind of cold, brutal mentality in all Europeans, of all persuasions, of all colors, of all politics, that you have to understand. They never worship anything. They never adhere to any politics that fail to accommodate their desire to control the world. Religion to you is religion. It has never been religion to them. It has been a means of controlling power. You are a religious people. They are a power-oriented people. They would not dare practice it in its true sense. Now, what got you into the concept of even thinking that a European could be religious or democratic? The two things he can't afford to be, and if he dared to be either one for 24 hours, he is finished. He can't afford to be there, because he will have to admit that you started the humane values that control the world, and that everything of consequence in the world started outside of Europe. This is why he must leave Europe and find things of substance in Africa and say, we started this. All right, let's see if we can use some logic. For most of the existence of Europe, Europe was an ice cap. Why would Europeans get from under the ice cap, go all the way to Africa, develop a civilization better than anything ever existed in the world and more durable, because it is still standing after 1,000 civilizations has come and gone and fell? Why would he come from under that ice, find a great civilization, go back under the ice and stay under there for 3,000 years, before he built a shoe in Europe or a house with a window. Then he would come and claim something that he had nothing to do with. Now, when the Greek miracle existed, Greece had her relationships with Africa. Most of Europe didn't exist. There was no such thing as Europe, and Europe is an invention anyway. Europe is not even a continent. Have you seen any maps lately? Why is it divided? Why is it the division? It's an extension of Asia. It's just northern Asia. All right, somebody arbitrarily decided it's a continent. Look at the dictionary definition of a continent. There's no qualification for a continent. All right, now, my main point here is that when the Greek intellectual miracle existed, there was no Europe. Not a single country in Europe existed. There was no Russia, no England, no Scandinavia. None of the countries in Europe existed. And yet every Scandinavian schoolboy, Russian schoolboy, English schoolboy can claim Greece as part of his intellectual heritage. When the Egyptian intellectual miracle existed, it existed in a valley 4,000 miles long, extending into Africa, and at least 16 African countries existed then under different names, but they did exist. And the people who would later be the major population of the country called Egypt, that the Greeks called Egypt, did exist. And they had no relationship with any other people in the world except African people. And there's no way the early people called Egyptians could have been anything other than African people, inasmuch as they had no relationship with any other people. Now, 3,000 years would pass before the people of Western Asia would have a relationship with them, and when they began to have a relationship, that relationship was bad. Nobody ever did African people any favor. Everybody ever came into Africa, came in to take something. And African people don't owe anybody anything. Now, if you understood this, maybe we could free ourselves. We are totally an unobligated people. We don't owe anybody anything anywhere, left or right. Everybody that has come among us have come among us to exploit us, and they have exploited us successfully. Now, let us begin at the beginning, because African people stood alone at the beginning of the world and started humanity, and started a thing as basic as tool making, as basic as making a bucket, a basket, as basic as learning how to use fire, how to bring down animals. Started all of this in the area to the south. When we look at and visualize a map of Africa, you have to visualize the Nile River and realize that that river is like the womb of a woman. And out of this womb came a series of children. Let us not call it civilization. White people have so misused the word civilization until the word has lost its meaning. Let us call it a culture. Came a series of cultures that developed and moved down that river, a great cultural highway, to establish a way of life and to create a way of life, religions and history that is going to be so rich that mankind will steal from them from then on. And the rape of the culture of that river will change the world for all times to come. Now, when a people are lost from their cultural moorings, living in another people's country, or living in a country ruled over by another people, worshiping a God chosen for them by another people, worshiping a God that don't look like them, wearing clothes not of their design, living in a culture that don't belong to them. They live with warped souls and a lack of meaning. This summer in West Africa, I had to remind some of the people with me, so you have been here 2 weeks now. You haven't seen any children fighting. You haven't heard anybody call anybody a bitch. You haven't heard the word MF all the time you've been here. You haven't seen friction among people. And this is because these Africans are in the cultural incubator that created them. In the United States, you are in conflict. You are in conflict, and the people that brought you here are in conflict. Because this container does not fit your soul. It does not fit the soul of the one who brought you here. It does not fit your soul. You will never be at peace in an alien land where you must compete for everything. You must compete for your bread, must compete for your apartment, must compete for your man, must compete for your woman, compete for your water, everything. You've got to compete with somebody for. Nothing comes automatically. Nothing is built into the culture itself. You came out of a culture where certain things are assured by virtue of coming out of the culture. And you didn't have to fight for them. Because if you obeyed the laws that govern the culture, the material resources of the culture, based on your need, came to you automatically. These were things of a socialist nature that existed in a culture not only before Karl Marx was born, but before Europe was born. This is why the African states trying to be communists are making a mistake, and this is why all of them will fail. Because the European concept of communism is alien to the soul of Africa. You take the African concept, and it's going to work. Because it was there all along. because it's a concept that's based on the African culture, in the African indigenous religion, in the African basic humanity. When you take this artificial Western junk, that you're going to build something on it, you're in trouble, because nothing builds on it. You try to build a house on sand. The foundation is not there. The culture foundation is not there. Now, I realize in a lecture like this, people will hear what you did not say and will stubbornly refuse to understand what you did say, because they have been trained in a certain way, and they have certain images in their mind, certain concepts of the deity they can't get out of their mind. They can't let go the blonde, blue-eyed Jesus the Jewish mythology gave you, who don't even look like a Jew. It's hard to release it from your mind. And you will have less respect for your father in your home until you give up that image. All people in the world paint the deity to resemble the father in the home. There's only one exception: you in the United States. All people in the world paint the deity to resemble the father in the home. The father figure in the image of the deity is always the same in every culture in the world. You living in a brainwashed culture, or been brainwashed by a culture, cannot let go. All right, now, let's go back. What I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to do is not to disturb your religion at all. I'm trying to restore a concept of history and a concept of religion to let you know that what you have been worshiping, if you worship Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, as devised, if you worship Islam as devised by the Arabs, Christianity as devised by the Europeans, Judaism as devised by the Jews, you are worshiping up a carbon copy of the original. I want to give you a picture of the original religion before someone tampered with it, changed it around, and made it the deification of their culture and their power desires. To the Western mind, religion is the deification of his culture and his desire for power. The Arabs made Islam a rationale for the slave trade. The Jews made Judaism a rationale for taking land that never belonged to them, not even in ancient times. The European made Christianity a rationale for his prejudice and his enslavement of other people. He never dared to use it in a Christian way. And I'm saying that this is a carbon copy and a debasement of the original. I'm not trying to take it away from you. I'm trying to show you the original copy as against the carbon copy. Now, the carbon copy might frighten you because you're so accustomed, the original copy might frighten you because you're so accustomed to the carbon copy, it might be a little hard for you to take. But all of these religions existed in another form before someone called them by these new names. Now, someone brought up in class last night that Islam came out of Africa. I said, yes, the elements came out of Africa. But the religion in its formal sense is an AD religion and not a BC religion. Because you cannot bring me in Islam before you bring me the Prophet Muhammad. And the Prophet Muhammad wasn't even born until near the end of the 6th century. Now, if you bring me in Islam before you bring me the Prophet Muhammad, you have to tell me where you got it from. If you say the elements that ultimately made the religion existed, I'll accept that. But you say the religion was there, then I'm going to ask some questions. What are you talking about? Then if you say, like some of the brothers in Manhattan, our religion started, God made the first Muslim, his name was Adam, then I have to tell you, when did Adam read the Quran before everybody wrote one? Everybody thinks his religion was there forever, and it is not necessary for your religion to have been there always to be true to you or good for you if you decide that it was good for you. Now, what we have to do is to look at the world before any of these religions came into being in a formal sense, when they existed in an informal sense in their teaching, in the elements that later went into their making existed, but the religion in their formal sense did not exist. And look at now you have to look at the making of the elements in the Nile Valley, the making of the great religions and the great spirituality of African people, when African people had no one in the world to depend on but themselves. You are looking at African people all by themselves. There are no Asians. Europe don't exist. There are nobody involved in this great intellectual show but African people. It is hard for you to conceive that there was a time when you did not ask anybody to do anything, and there was nobody around to show you anything, and you did the greatest thing you have ever done on the earth, and you did things so great that the world is still trying to copy it and trying to learn what it was. And you letting your children come home from school saying that mathematics is hard, he can't add 9 times 9. Said, damn it, if those people built the pyramids before Westerners had shoes, don't be telling me that mathematics is hard. We invented it. And what happened to you is that someone made you lose your confidence in yourself. This is how the European rules the world, by making people lose their confidence in themselves. And once we restore our confidence in ourselves, we're going to first take over ourselves, then we're going to take over the world that we need to control, the big continent of Africa. Then we're going to start with a safety pin, go to a locomotive, and make every damn thing else in the world we need to make. And we'll take off all the clothes we didn't make and start making them ourselves. But in the years, in the thousands of years before anybody broke our confidence in ourselves, let's have a look at what we did as a people before any other people interfered with us. Let's look at that history. All right. In the Nile Valley, in the upper end of the Nile Valley, now the upper means lower to you. The Nile River is a contradiction. Most rivers of the world start in the north and flows to the south. The Nile Valley is a contradiction. It starts in the south and flows to the north. So when I say upper, I mean down south, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia. That's upper. That's where it starts. Those great lakes in the mountains, Lake Tana, and all those seas and tributaries that makes the Nile, and it flows to the north. So that's where the culture started. 4,000 miles before it dumps into the Mediterranean, somewhere near Cairo. All right? I'm talking about the upper, and that's where the incubator that started, that sent the baby down the river to get Egypt started thousands of years before. This is what Chancellor Williams is talking about in his book, The Destruction of Africa, when he calls Egypt Ethiopia's oldest daughter. All right, let's see how civilization was formed in the south at Olave Gorge, Tanzania, in Kenya, in the highlands of Ethiopia. This is where they found the oldest remains of human beings on the face of this earth. Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia, they found skeletons of some of the lady they stupidly called Lucy. Why Lucy, I don't know, but let's be that as it may. It contradicts the previous findings because it proves that the bones of a woman can survive for millions of years. Male chauvinism once held sway, and they assumed that because all the previous bones have been that of a man, they just proved that they assumed that women's bones were so soft that none of them survived. Here they've not only found the female bones, they even found the bones of female children. So that put that nonsense to rest. But they call her Lucy. Lucy and her family. And she was nearly 5 million years old. All right. Now, one of the oldest in the world was found in Ethiopia, in the hills of Ethiopia. Next find, the previous finds, Kenya. Earliest finds, Tanzania. All over 1 million years old. Now, the oldest find in Europe, the so-called Piltdown man, proved to be a fake. Another found, the oldest in Asia was the Peking man who was only 600,000 years old, just a little more than 500,000. All of them were youngsters in comparison to Africa. But the main point is that on the banks of the Nile River, man got civilized culture underway. And this culture began to people those river banks. You can understand why most human culture started on river banks. And most burial places were on river banks. Because the river was a place, water, it was a place where animal life came, and you could slaughter your animal life to eat. And sometimes you used as a human burial ground. It was also a place where many times you buried the bones of the animal, or you just left them there. Most human remains, human and animal, been found along river banks. Some of the rivers have dried up, and they're called wadis. These are rivers that no longer have water. This is why the great archaeological digs are along riverbanks, especially indentations in the earth where rivers used to be. All right, now, the greatest riverbank in the world, and the richest riverbank area in the history of the world is the Nile River area. Now, the rich earth coming down from Ethiopia started that river to overflow. It started erratic at first. Then finally it began to overthrow at a regular basis. And when it began to overthrow at a regular basis, man knew exactly when to get out of the way, when to come back and to plant in the rich black soil along the riverbanks. Now you have the world's first agriculture. You have the first nation that can engage in massive feeding. You've got the first supply of durable food, storable food. And what is this storable food? Dried beans.